I'm with Don K. Preston, and just an honor for me, Don, to be with you tonight. Probably about, I want to say 2.5 years ago, I was praying to God. I talked to my wife that there had to be somebody out there, some group, somebody, some person who studied the scriptures how I studied them. And by that, I mean, Don, I had always learned, you as well, I'm sure, to follow the three-step method of Bible study. Observation, who wrote it, when did they write it, why did they write it, or who was speaking, who's the audience, what did the speaker writer mean, what did the reader or listener understand the writer or speaker to be communicating? How did they in themselves interpret it? How did they themselves apply it? And then from observation, then to interpretation, what does it mean? Then to application, is there application for us today? What I noticed, Don, was even though I had some well-meaning people teach me observation, interpretation, application, and it's standard practice in most denominations, in most seminaries, agreed upon by most theologians. I couldn't find anybody who actually practiced it. That they skipped observation, they skipped interpretation, and they went directly to application, which is where most of the sermons in our churches are today. It's where most of the small groups that are really popular today in churches. It's where most Sunday school classes for churches who still do Sunday school. It's all about application. And I began to understand the Bible when I really spent time in observation, then interpretation. And I couldn't find anybody that I knew of who actually did that. So I remember talking to my wife and asking God, would you connect me to someone? And there's got to be somebody out there who actually practices this three-step method and not just teaches it, but actually takes it serious. And I had a friend of mine who you and I have in common, who actually contacted me in a text message about mid-October of 2023, I believe. And he said, hey, Brad, have you ever considered that the book of Revelation may have already been fulfilled? And I respected my friend. I'd heard of people who actually thought that, but I didn't myself give it much consideration. So because I respected my friend, I thought, well, he used to hold to a futurist view of Revelation, and now he holds to a fulfilled view. That spoke to me that I at least need to, out of respect for him, study it myself, because I'd never really studied it. I'd only dismissed it, but I'd never studied it. I think he was an answer to my prayer. And then I asked my friend, where do I start? Where do I begin? So he sends me your thumbnail, Covenant Eschatology, that's on your YouTube channel. That's one of your playlists. And I listened to all that, which was the introduction for me. I was so new into it, Don, that a lot of the terminology I didn't understand at the time. It took some time. But I began listening to a lot of your podcasts. I mean, a lot of your playlist, a lot of your videos. I wasn't getting much sleep. I was listening to some. I'd go to sleep, Don, with my phone and your playlist under my pillow. And I told my friend, I said, man, I'm not getting any sleep. I'm putting on a ton of weight because I'm not exercising anymore. All I'm doing is listening to Don, and I'm learning a lot from Don. And I started branching out, because then I began to realize, oh, there's other people like Don who have some similar views. So I began to branch out. So one of the things I'm doing with these interviews, Don, is there's a lot of people who love God. They love Jesus. They faithfully attend church. They've been in Sunday school classes for their entire lives. They're actively involved in small groups. They love praise and worship at their church. They're beginning to hear fulfilled eschatology.
Hmm.
They're beginning to hear that revelation's been fulfilled. Two examples. I live in Johnson City, Tennessee. One of the churches in Johnson City, Tennessee, pastor recently did a whole message series that revelation's been fulfilled.
Oh, wow.
Probably wouldn't have heard that 5 years ago, 10 years
No,
ago, 20 years
no.
ago. My brother-in-law lives in Nashville, Tennessee at a large Baptist church. The pastor at the large Baptist church just did a series recently on Revelation being fulfilled. So I think what's beginning to happen in our time is more and more people are beginning to hear about Revelation being fulfilled, but they don't know what to do with it. It seems heretical to them.
Yes.
It seemed heretical to me initially. As I've gotten to know and read and listen to people like you, what I've discovered was you're just like all of us. So many people who hold to a fulfilled view of Revelation, we all started in a futurist view for the most part.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
somewhere along the way, we were introduced to a fulfilled view. We began studying the scriptures. We're not heretical now because we hold to a fulfilled view. We were just interested and curious. So, what I'd love for you to do is share with our audience your journey from where you began with your eschatology to where you are now in your eschatology. I'm going to turn it
Certainly.
over to you, Don. I'm going to let you do most of the talking because I want people to hear your story of eschatology.
Well, thank you. First of all, Brad, thank you for having me on. Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored by it, and I appreciate the opportunity. A little bit about my background. I am a fifth generation member of the Churches of Christ, and that means I was raised as an amillennialist. And my father was a minister. His father was an itinerant minister. My grandfather used to literally ride a Jenny mule around to small country congregations in Northwest Arkansas and preach. Now, we're talking congregations of 20, 30 people, in the backwoods of Arkansas. But he was a very, very dedicated man. And my father was not knowledgeable on eschatology. I think it's interesting you brought up the book of Revelation. My father was personally terrified of the book of Revelation. I heard him say on many different occasions he did not know what to think about Revelation. He did not know what it meant. He didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't like to teach on Revelation. He very commonly he, he very commonly would teach on Revelation 1 through 5, turn around, start all over again. Because he did not know what to do
Yeah.
with the rest of the books. And of course, as a young man growing up, I thought my father was the greatest Bible student in all the world, and he was very, very smart. There's no question about it. Um, I did not know what to think about eschatology. Eschatology is a 50-cent word, and it means the study of last things. Eschatos in the Greek means to last. Ology means study of. So eschatology means the study of last things. And normally by study of last things, we mean the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the new creation, et cetera, et cetera.
The establishment of the new heaven, the new earth,
The establishment of the new heaven and the new earth, the kingdom, even.
the kingdom. That's right. That's right.
And so, like I said, my father openly stated many times he didn't know what to think about eschatology. And when I went to seminary, strangely enough, three different things happened that reinforced, shall we say, that confusion that my father had shared with me. Um, when it came to the Olivet Discourse, my professor began the class by saying, I really don't know what to teach on this. The traditional view is that the chapter of Matthew 24 and 25 are divided, a discussion of Jesus's judgment on Jerusalem in AD 70, and then a discussion of the end of the world. He didn't know how to explain that. He didn't know how to exegete. Exegesis means to draw out of the text what is there instead of reading into the text what is not there. And so that was disturbing because it didn't give me the answers that I wanted. Like most believers, I was intrigued by Matthew 24 and 25. But when I read it, I wasn't seeing there what all the commentators were seeing. And so, I'm going, wait a minute, I'm just a young guy, and here are all these professors with their PhDs, and they're confused. And what am I supposed to do with this? A second thing was when it came to the book of Revelation, my professor starts the study by saying, guys, I've got to tell you something. I don't believe what I'm going to teach you about Revelation. You're going, what? You've got a PhD for crying out loud. And you're starting out the class by saying, I don't believe what I'm going to teach you. So he continued and he said, look, I'm going to teach you what is in the textbooks that have been assigned. Not that I believe it, but because that's the course. That's the textbook. And he said, I don't know what else to teach. So he taught the late date application, shall we say, the traditional amillennial. Amillennial means that there's not a belief in a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth. The amillennial view is that the millennium is the Christian age, broadly speaking. And so that's what he taught us, all the while saying, that's not what I'm seeing in the text, but I don't have a better explanation. The third thing that was so perplexing was my professor, very erudite guy, extremely well read, walks in. We're beginning Second Thessalonians chapter 1. And he says, guys, I've got to tell you, I've got a real serious problem with Second Thessalonians. And once again, we're a class of young guys. We think our professors hung the moon when it comes to theology. How could they be saying they have a problem with Revelation or the Olivet? How could this happen? And someone asked, well, Brother Stewart, what do you mean you've got a problem? He said, let me just cite a text. So he begins with 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 7. And to those of you who are being troubled, rest with us when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven in flaming fire, taking vengeance on those that do not know God and that do not obey the gospel. And so we're sitting there going, what's the problem? Because 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 is one of those chapters that in preachers' parlance, preachers often say, boy, you can wax an elephant with that. Because meaning you can really be eloquent in it and use it as a scare tactic to get people walk down the aisle.
Yep.
And he said, look, fellas, here, and of course, we're still going, what's the problem? He goes, well, let's go back to verse 4 and read the context. That goes back to the three points that you initially talked about, Brad. And it's points that in the churches of Christ, yes, we were constantly told. Observation. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. On and on. But he said, here is Paul writing to people who are clearly being persecuted at the time he's writing to them. And he said, that's in 52 AD. And he said, we know from Acts chapter 17 that it was the Jews that were persecuting them. And then he said, folks, here's the problem that I see. We never start with verse 5 and 6. We jump in at verse 7. And we say, well, to those of you who are troubled. And that means anybody that's got heart trouble, they've got cancer, they got problems with teenage kids, whatever.
Yeah.
And he said, that's not what it says. Paul says it's a righteous thing with God to repay with tribulation those who are troubling you, and to give to you who are being, it's all in the present tense in the Greek, to those of you who are being troubled, rest with us when the Lord Jesus is revealed. And he said, guys, Paul was saying to those Thessalonians 2,000 years ago who were being persecuted that Christ was going to come and give them relief from their then ongoing persecution. And he said, look, I know the Lord didn't come. And he said, that's problematic. And we're sitting there going, no, 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 no. There's got to be an explanation for this. I don't know who spoke up and said, Brother Stewart, that can't be right. And he goes, guys, read the text. Well, you know, when you're in seminary, your time is so tightly consumed, you don't have time to go home, read it, contemplate it, really dig into it. But it was after I graduated that what he said really, really, really soaked in. And I'm going, oh, wow, that's troublesome. I didn't know what to do with it, Brad. I really didn't, because I was raised in an environment that said the coming of the Lord is the end of time, end of human history, or if you wish to use it like this, the end of the Christian age. So how could Paul be saying that an event that's supposed to be at the end of the Christian age was going to happen in the lifetime of those Thessalonians and give them? Well, then I made the mistake of digging into the Greek. And the Greek is very emphatic. There's no way around it. Paul is writing to Christians 2,000 years ago, being persecuted by the Jews. And Paul said Christ was going to come and give them, the Christians, 2,000 years ago, relief. The Greek word that is translated as rest in the King James, New King James, is from the Greek word onesis. And it simply means relief. It never means, by the way, it never means reward. Never.
Mm-hmm.
It's relief. So here's Paul unequivocally saying the Lord was going to come in the lifetime of the Thessalonians and give them relief from that then ongoing persecution. Well, you see, one of the problems that presented for me, Brad, was that I was raised believing that Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and chapter 2, when he predicted the arrival of the man of sin, the son of perdition, that's talking about the Roman Catholic Church that at near the end of time is going to regain his power and authority and begin persecuting the true church, and that Christ would come and destroy the Pope at the end of time.
Yep.
Well, unfortunately, the present tense of the Greek terms in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 won't allow that. The historical context won't allow that, because Paul's talking to people who were living, who were being persecuted. Acts chapter 17 verifies everything. It's a historical situation. So those were three things that really, really caused my inner mind, my conscience, I was struck to my soul. When I graduated from seminary, I moved to Shawnee, Oklahoma, fresh out of seminary, and they already had a ladies' Bible class going on. And the minister that was there had been doing this for years. Great, great guy, very scholarly guy. And so he had resigned and left town. So the ladies' Bible class didn't know what to do. And so here I am. And so I said, well, what do you want to do? They said, well, why don't you finish teaching what he was teaching? I said, okay, that'd be fine. I finished that very short order. And I made a huge mistake, Brad, a huge mistake. I said, okay, ladies, what do you want me to teach? And the whole class, about 30 ladies, maybe 40, we want you to teach the Olivet Discourse.
What your professor didn't know about in
What my
seminary.
professor didn't know about, what my dad did not know about. The Olivet Discourse is what is normally referred to as Matthew 24 and 25, Mark 13, Luke chapter 21. And the reason it's called that is because in Matthew chapter 23, Jesus has been in the temple. And boy, he has ripped up the Jewish authorities in the temple for their hypocrisy, for the dishonesty, for a host of things.
Yep.
And he turns to them and he says, "Your house is left to you desolate." Well, the Jews understood exactly what he meant because that language came right straight out of the book of Jeremiah. When Jeremiah said, "Your house is left to you desolate," that meant Jerusalem and the temple was about to fall. It was about to be destroyed. So they had no qualms about what Jesus was saying. So as Jesus began to leave the temple area, his apostles began to point out the absolutely incredible size and beauty of the architectural stones. I mean, Josephus records for us the size of those stones, and it's staggering. The size of those stones is literally staggering, even by today's standards. And so they're showing him, and they're beautiful. Many of the stones are just absolutely gorgeous. The ancient rabbis used to say of the temple itself, no man who has never seen the temple has ever seen a beautiful thing. I mean, white marble, gold overlays, red cedar, you name it. Awesome, awesome. So that's what the apostles just heard Jesus say, "Your house is left to you desolate." Uh-oh, this is bad news. Really, really bad news. And so they're leaving the temple, and as they go out, they go to the Mount of Olives, which is right across the Kidron Valley from the temple. So he's sitting directly across from the Mount of Olives. And looking back west, Mount of Olives is east. Looking back west, you can see the temple, right? It's right there. And the majesty and the glory of that temple. So as they're leaving on their way to Mount of Olives, Jesus said, as in response to the apostles, showing him the stones of the temple, Jesus says, "Do you not see all of these things? The time is coming in which not one stone shall be left standing on top of another." And the apostles are staggered. Now, mind you, the apostles, as good, faithful Jews, would have known, would have understood from the Tanakh, and the word Tanakh is the Old Testament. That's all in the world it means. It's a Hebrew term to refer to the Old Testament. The apostles knew that in the Tanakh there were countless Old Testament prophecies of the last days destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And I wrote a book on this, Brad, entitled "These Are the Days in Which All Things Must Be Fulfilled." It's on my website, donkpreston.com. And if someone wants a really, really good resource for what I just said, and that is that the Old Testament is full of Old Testament prophecies of the destruction of Jerusalem in the last days. And that's been part of my own learning process because I didn't know that growing up.
Yeah.
No clue whatsoever.
And when you say the last days, my mind always went to the last days of planet Earth.
That's right. That's the way I was raised.
Yes, but as we study out the last days, latter days of Deuteronomy 32, um, it's Daniel chapter 2. It's the
Daniel
last days
12,
of
yeah.
Old Covenant Israel.
Yes.
Their last days, not our last days. It's really past days with
Yes.
us. The Olivet Discourse, Sunday school class with the
Okay.
ladies. You
Okay. But
define the
anyway,
Olivet Discourse for us: the fall of the temple, the
yes,
fall of
yes,
Jerusalem, the last days of Old Covenant Israel. So now
yes.
you're teaching the
Well,
ladies Sunday school.
I didn't jump right in. I mean, here I am confused because of my seminary professors, my dad, and the preachers that I knew. So when the ladies said, "We want you to teach the Olivet Discourse," I said, "Well, okay, ladies, but you have to give me 1 year to prepare." And they're going, "Wait a minute, you just graduated from seminary. You're supposed to have the answers." I said, "Well, I know I'm supposed to, but I don't." So I told my story. I said, "So look, I want answers myself, but I'm not going to go about it in an ad hoc way. I want to do some serious research to make up my own mind about what the Olivet Discourse is genuinely all about." And they were going, "Well, that sounds reasonable. Okay, One of the things that I did, Brad, I had a very large, spacious office at the congregation there. I went and got several old, worn out Bibles, and I cut out all of the pages that contained the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 and 25, pardon me, Mark 13, Luke chapter 21. Here I am, I'm coming to this conclusion. I didn't know anyone who believed and taught that the Olivet Discourse was about one subject. And that's the end of the Old Covenant age in Jesus's historical coming. And so what my research forced me to do, Brad, was to dig into the Old Testament, begin to read the New Testament more carefully, Brad. And over and over and over and over, I saw the New Testament writers quoting from the Old Testament, anticipating its fulfillment.
You mentioned Thessalonians a while ago with Jesus coming in flaming fire. The NIV says blazing fire, but the Greek word there literally is flaming fire.
Yes.
He's taking directly from Isaiah 66 and the fall of the temple and the destruction of the temple.
No
So
doubt.
whether you're in Revelation with over 400 references to the Hebrew Bible, whether it's Peter, whether it's Paul, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, it's quotation after quotation after quotation from the Hebrew Bible. And what we do as believers is we skip over the quotations, or we don't know. Like, who would know reading, I think it was First Thessalonians, and correct me if I'm wrong, chapter 1, when the persecution was going on, that Jesus said was going to happen. It's happening. Paul's living in that persecution that Jesus said was going to happen. But he said Jesus was going to come and give relief, and he was going to come in flaming fire. Now, from heaven in flaming fire, if I remember right, there's no way any believer is going to connect that to Isaiah 66 and 65 for the most part. And until I heard you mention it in one of your playlists that I was listening to, that's when you're the dot connector. That was two dots you were connecting. And so and you're not the original dot connector.
No.
The apostles were. Matthew was, Mark was, Luke was, Paul was. They were connecting all the dots for us to read this story, this narrative that's unfolding in the Bible. So you started noticing in your eschatology journey, you started noticing as you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all the way through Revelation, how often the writers, Jesus, the speaker, Paul, the speaker in Acts 13, is quoting directly from the Hebrew Bible. And that was a aha moment for you in your eschatology journey.
It was a several year aha moment.
Okay.
2 Peter chapter 3. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. This second epistle I've written unto you, dearly beloved, in both of which to stir up your minds, holy minds, by way of remembrance, that you might be mindful of the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and of the prophets who have spoken beforehand, and of the apostles of the Lord Jesus Christ, saying, in the last days scoffers shall come. So the Old Testament foretold the prophets, and in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 and following, the earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing that all these things shall happen, what manner of men ought we to be? Because according to its promise, we look for a new heaven, new earth. Well, where did the promise of the new heaven, new earth come from? Isaiah 65 and 66.
Going back in your eschatology journey, you're preparing to teach the Olivet Discourse. In your preparation, you begin to see the quotations of eschatology in Matthew through Revelation, and begin to notice that it's really explaining what we've read from Genesis through Malachi.
Absolutely.
Because when Matthew and Mark and Luke open up, it's pretty quick they get to John the Baptist, which is right out of the Elijah to come out of
Exactly.
Malachi, which is the last days of Old Covenant Israel. You go to Acts chapter 2, people think the disciples, the apostles, are drunk. And he says, oh, no, that's not what this is. You're seeing what Joel talked about, the coming of the Spirit in the last days.
A
So
fulfillment
it's
of an
the
Old Testament prophecy.
exactly. So their eschatology came straight from Jesus's eschatology, Paul's eschatology, John's eschatology, all came from the Hebrew Bible, the Old
Yes.
Testament scriptures. So you had that aha moment over the course of the time. You prepare, you're teaching the ladies Bible study, and take us from that point.
Yes. So it took me a year to teach. I tried to be very, very meticulous. At the end of the study, I said, okay, ladies, because again, I'm teaching a class of ladies who have never heard this. I said, ladies, there it is. I said, I understand that's not what you've been taught. It's not what I was taught. Tell me what you think. Total, absolute silence. And I thought, oh, they are going to kill me. They're going to go talk to their husbands. We got to get rid of this dude. He's crazy. And finally, one lady who never spoke up, never, ever, ever spoke up in class. She goes, makes more sense than anything I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And another lady or two, before you know it, literally the majority of the class starts chiming in and saying, actually, that's beautiful. That makes so much sense. This is the greatest legacy that my father left me. He would say, now, Don, you've got to learn to make up your own mind about what the Bible says. He said, now, I want you to understand what I'm talking about. I want you to read the commentators and take the evidence that they present and analyze it. Check it out, see if it's true. If it's true, accept it. He said, if you get to go to seminary, and my father wanted me to go to seminary more than anything else in this world. He was thrilled to death when I got to. He financially supported me there. But nonetheless, he he said, when you go to seminary, you listen carefully to your professors. You listen, you take notes, you analyze. And if what they say is true, then you stand on it. He said, yeah, listen to them, appreciate them. Those are good men. They love the Lord. But he said, in the final analysis, you study and make up your own mind. He said, pardon me, you take in all of this information and you analyze it carefully, analytically, critically. And he said, when you come to a conclusion, then you stand on that conclusion. Now, if somebody challenges that and shows you, now look, Don, here's why that's wrong. If their evidence is good, then you change. He always told me, do not be ashamed or afraid to change your position. Isaiah 64 through 66, where Isaiah predicted, Isaiah 65, verse 17, for behold, I create new heaven and new earth. Well, that's the foundation. That's the fountain for 2 Peter chapter 3 and Revelation 21, as you well know. Okay. Every single, and I've compiled a list of 12 of the leading scholars in the world today. I don't mean secondary, third, tertiary level scholars. I'm talking the cream of the crop scholars. You know what they say, Brett? I would really like to find that list of scholars. Ah, bingo. I knew it was there somewhere. I had used it just this morning. This is from Brever Childs in his commentary on Isaiah, okay? He says, quote, the new heavens and new earth forms part of Isaiah's idiom of covenantal transformation, not the abrogation of the physical universe.
Yep.
Now, Brad, to the regular pew-sitting Christian, okay, to read a statement like that, you're going, well, no, wait a minute. The Bible talks about physical decreation. physical destruction of the universe. He says on the very next page, Isaiah employs cosmic language in a highly metaphorical and theological manner to speak of radical historical change within God's people, not in the cosmos,
Yep.
not in physical creation, but a change of covenantal relationship. And like I said, I've got 12 citations. I won't take up enough time.
And Don, talking about second Peter chapter 3, and Peter's talking about the scoffers that will come in the last days. Well, one of the things that was very helpful for me, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Paul, whether it's Peter, a lot of times when we're reading the Bible, they're quoting from the Hebrew Bible. We don't know they're quoting from the Hebrew Bible, and because we don't know they're quoting from the Hebrew Bible, we're going to misinterpret what is being communicated. An example of that is 2 Peter chapter 3.
Oh.
So when Peter uses the word scoffers, I've learned to, I use Blue Letter Bible.
Okay.
And I'll go to Blue Letter Bible and I'll put scoffers in, and it'll bring up every place scoffers is used in the entire Bible. And you can pick your translation.
Yeah.
NIV, New King, whatever. Peter's not making that word up. He's not pulling it out of a vacuum. He's actually taking it out of Jeremiah. He's taking it out of Ezekiel, because the scoffers were the priests, those in Jerusalem in Jeremiah and Ezekiel. It was the leaders of Israel. And I think even Isaiah, if I remember quoting scoffers.
Isaiah 28.
28, exactly. And so the scoffers of 2 Peter chapter 3 are the people of Israel who were scoffing at Jesus being the Messiah, Jesus being the Christ. They're scoffing that, where's the promise of his coming? Well, it's not modern day people today who are scoffing at Jesus. It was people scoffing them, because Jesus had very clearly and repetitiously stated that he was coming to judge Old Covenant Israel. He said in Matthew chapter 26, verse 64, he was going to come on the clouds and judge the Sanhedrin and the leaders who were mocking him. That day of judgment was coming on the clouds. So if we don't understand that all the terminology here, scoffers, coming on the clouds, is rooted in the Hebrew Bible, and it's almost like the New Testament explains the Old, but the Old explains the New. Mm-hmm. That you really need both, and to bring the full narrative together.
And I stumbled upon Ezekiel chapter 7. In Ezekiel chapter 7, seven times, the Lord, through Ezekiel, said, Son of man, say to this people, the day of the Lord has drawn near. It is near. It is very near. It is coming soon. It is coming shortly. 7 times. My first problem was, well, he says it's the day of the Lord, for crying out loud. That's in the 6th century BC. Oh, well, I very soon also learned, this was in my study for the Olivet Discourse teaching, Brad, that the term day of the Lord did not mean what I thought it meant. And this is a very quick sidebar, but let me give an illustration of this. In Ezekiel chapter 13, 6, Ezekiel is prophesying to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he's chiding them because what are they doing? Well, as Jeremiah, contemporary prophet, said, woe to those who say peace, peace, when there is no peace. The prophet was saying, the Lord is coming. Were they looking for a time-ending, earth-burning event? No. So here's Ezekiel being told 7 times. The people's response to that language was Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 3 through 7. No. It's not time. The time is delayed. It's time for us to build our houses, to plant our vineyards. It's time for us to go about our normal business. In Ezekiel chapter 12, the Lord responded to those people who were doing what Isaiah, hundreds of years before said, woe, woe to those who put the day of the Lord far off. So in Ezekiel chapter 12, 21 and following, the Lord said, Son of man, what is this proverb that you have in the land of Israel, saying, the day of the Lord is far off, saying, every vision fails? For verily I say unto you, son of man, they will no longer say, the days are prolonged and every vision fails. For in your days, O Israel, I will bring it to pass. I will fulfill all of my word. Now that's a paraphrase, but you kind of get the idea.
And that fulfilled word was judgment.
Judgment, and that's what he calls it, the day of the Lord.
Yep.
Now, here's what we have to understand, and this again is part of that life-changing growth in my understanding. In the Tanakh, the Old Testament, the day of the Lord was any time that God, in his sovereignty, used this nation over here to judge this nation over here. Isaiah 19 is a really classic example of it. Behold, the Lord, and in the Hebrew it's Yahweh, Yahweh. Behold, the Lord rides on a cloud, on a swift cloud, and comes into Egypt. And the river shall be dried up, the fish shall die, there will be no birds in the air, and on and on and on. The language is horrific. Okay. Well, some people say, well, the Lord never came. Well, he said he was going to, but here's the key. Isaiah chapter 20, which is a continuation of the same prophecy, there is no chapter break. It tells us that it was Sargon, the king of the Assyrians, that was going to destroy Egypt by invading her and destroying her.
Yep.
Well, that happened in 712 BC. Or was that 720? 712. I think that's right. So, but the point of it is, God was using in his sovereignty one nation to judge another, and yet it said that it was coming on the clouds. And you have all of these examples of this throughout. I love the book of Isaiah especially, but I like Micah and Malachi and all of them that use this kind of language. We find predictions of the day of the Lord, of God coming on the clouds with the angels, with a shout, in flaming fire, with hailstones. And I really, really
Which are
love
old covenant judgments
bingo.
on Jerusalem, on Israel, on the land, on the people, when a sword, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, being an army of a nation, would come in, and like Babylon came in, Second Chronicles 36.
Yes,
Daniel was taken captive to Babylon. So yeah, the day of the Lord were these destructions
yes,
by one nation of organized by God.
yes. And we find something very graphic and very specific in Ezekiel 29 through 31, in which Yahweh said, Nebuchadnezzar, that's the king of the Babylonians. He's the one that destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC. He's the one that destroyed Egypt. He's the one that destroyed Edom. He's the one that destroyed a total of 25 nations that are enumerated in Ezekiel 25 and Jeremiah 25. But in Ezekiel 29 to 31, the Lord said that Nebuchadnezzar was his sword.
Yep.
But he also said, I will put my sword into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, and he will destroy all of these nations. And another example is extremely, extremely powerful is Isaiah chapter 10, 5 and 7. Oh, Assyria. Now, this is the same Assyria that was going to come into Egypt riding on a cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it's the same Assyria, by the way, that was going to come out of heaven and walk on the mountains, and the earth was going to melt underneath his feet in the book of Micah, chapter 1, verse 2.
Yep.
Well, we know that God destroyed the 10 northern tribes in 721 BC. But he didn't literally, visibly, or bodily come out of heaven, and the earth didn't melt under his feet. We're pretty sure about this. This is what is known as apocalyptic. There's a big fancy word for you. Apocalyptic. It's hyperbolic, massively exaggerated language, and
To
it's
describe the
metaphor
fall of a nation.
to describe the fall of a nation. So, but this gives us insights into the nature of Hebraic apocalyptic language.
You have in Jeremiah chapter 4, you have God advancing on the clouds through the Babylonian armies to destroy Jerusalem. If I'm right about that, I think that's
Yes,
right.
yes, yes,
Um, and then you have the imagery that you talked about of the sun going dark and the moon and the stars and all the things that are falling. Um, these are metaphors for judgment on nations.
yes,
So that when we move through the Olivet Discourse, we get into Matthew chapter 24, Jesus starts using this type of imagery, these metaphors to describe the destruction of the nation of Israel.
yes,
And it's not literally the stars and the moon and the sun, but he's going back into the Hebrew Bible to describe the collapse of nations. And
yes.
that's what's going on. It's the collapse of the temple. It's the collapse of Jerusalem. It's a sword is going through the land. There will be great distress in the land in Luke chapter 21.
Yes,
Armies will surround the temple. And it's the fall of Jerusalem. It's the fall of the temple. And then that's what you see in Revelation. You see the same imagery that's taken from the Hebrew Bible describing the fall of Mystery Babylon, the great city. Well, the great city is Jerusalem of Revelation chapter 11, verse 8, where our Lord was crucified. John identifies the great city in Revelation 11, verse
yes,
8. And so we know the great city, we know Mystery Babylon is Jerusalem, where the prophets were killed, where the blood was spilled, and the vengeance of God is coming upon Israel, just like Jesus said in Luke chapter 21, around verses 21, 22 through 25, that the day of vengeance, the sword, Isaiah 61, verse 2, the year of the Lord's favor would be over for Israel,
that's right.
and the day of God's vengeance would happen. The year of the
Yes,
Lord's favor is in Luke chapter 4. Jesus quotes out of Isaiah
Isaiah
61, 1 and
61.
2. So at the beginning of his ministry, hey, Israel, it's the year of God's favor. It's your time to come to believe in me as Messiah, as Christ, because judgment's coming. According to Isaiah 61, verse 2, it's the day of God's vengeance. It's the day of the Lord. It's the end of old covenant Israel. That's covenant eschatology.
Yes,
It's bringing an end to old covenant Israel, which is 2 Peter chapter 3. Well, 1 Peter chapter 5, not 1 Peter, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. If I think I'm getting this right, where they're saying peace and safety, nothing's going to happen to us. Well, again, Paul's not using these words out of a vacuum.
correct.
You quoted them earlier out of Ezekiel chapter 7. Jeremiah
Jeremiah.
said the same thing.
Yeah,
The leaders of Israel, the false prophets, were saying, Jeremiah's wrong. Ezekiel's wrong. Judgment's not coming. There's peace and safety here. There's peace and safety here. Peace, peace. And judgment came. Well, the same thing was happening. That's what Paul's talking about, I think, in 1 Thessalonians verse 5, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, where he's talking about the people saying peace and safety, meaning all these people who are prophesying the fall of Jerusalem and the fall of the temple, that's not going to happen.
right.
We're at peace and safety. Come to the scoffers of 2 Peter chapter 3. They're scoffing at the promised coming of the Messiah. You have Peter ending that, talking about the new heaven and the new earth, where he's quoting out of Isaiah 65 before he quotes Isaiah 65 verse 17, the new heaven and the new earth. He's talking about the fall of Jerusalem. He's talking about the destruction of the temple. And then he expounds on it, or Isaiah does, in 66. So the old heaven and earth has to be understood based upon what we learn about the new heaven and earth. The new heaven and earth came after Jerusalem was destroyed, came after
Yes.
the temple. It's the new covenant heaven and earth.
And
Whereas the
let's
old is
illustrate
the old covenant heaven and earth.
Matthew 16,
Yes.
27, 28. So
Yeah.
first of all, what did Jesus say? The Son of Man is going to come in the glory of the Father. Well, what does in the glory of the Father means? Well, according to the Greek scholars, it means Jesus was saying he was going to come in the same way the Father had come.
Yep.
Well, wait a minute. How did Isaiah say the Father had come? He had not come literally, visibly, and bodily. So if Jesus says the Son of Man is going to come in the same way the Father had come, and the Father had never come literally, visibly, and bodily, then that means that Jesus was not predicting that he was going to come literally, visibly, and bodily,
He was coming on the clouds
coming on the clouds
in judgment.
in judgment. And
Yes.
that's what
Metaphorically on the clouds.
yes, that's what verse 27 is all about. It's judgment.
Yep.
And by the way, it's taken from Daniel chapter 7, 13 and 14.
Yep.
The Son of Man, I saw one like the Son of Man come before the Ancient of Days. That's a judgment context.
Yep.
To judge the little horn, by the way.
Yep.
And so here's Jesus promising to come in judgment. And verse 28 says, verily I say unto you, some standing here will not taste of death. They're not going to die until they see this happen. Anyway, John chapter 5, 19 and following, Jesus reiterated essentially the same thing. Jesus said, and folks, boy, you got to catch this. This is so powerful. From henceforth, the Father judges no one. Okay, wait a minute. Who is doing all the judgment and judging in the Old Testament? What's Yahweh? Yahweh rode on the clouds. Yahweh came with a shout. He came with fire, etc., etc. From henceforth, the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, so that, oh, this is so good, so that all men might honor the Son as they honor the Father. The Son can do nothing of himself but what he sees the Father do. How had the Son seen the Father act in judgment?
Yep.
He had seen him use Nebuchadnezzar to destroy 25 nations, including Jerusalem. He had seen the Father use Assyria to destroy nation after nation after nation. But he never came literally and bodily. So Jesus said, I'm going to come in judgment exactly like my Father came, in order that men might honor me as they honor the Father.
Yep. And the whole context of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Revelation, it's judging Old Covenant Israel. He's pronounced judgment on the cities of Israel. He's pronounced judgment on the people of Israel as we read the narrative. He's pronounced judgment on Jerusalem. He's pronounced judgment on the temple. And he is arrested by the Sanhedrin. And he tells them in Matthew 26:64, the next time you see me, you will see me coming on the clouds.
Right.
And they understood what that meant. They understood because they understood the Hebrew Bible. He's talking about armies, Jesus directing armies to destroy the temple, to destroy Jerusalem. And that's what we see playing out in Revelation when the Roman armies come and they destroy Jerusalem. They destroy the temple. I'm just going to do a quick summary of how you went from Amil to fulfilled. And what led you to that was Bible study. What led you to that was paying attention to the audience, to the time statements, to the soon, to understanding the imagery of coming on clouds, that type of judgment. And so my encouragement to anybody who's watching our video, come to your own conclusions.
Hmm.
But my encouragement would be don't come to your conclusions apart from a thorough study of the Bible and a thorough study of the time statements in the Bible, the writer, the speaker to audience. Really focus in on observation and interpretation before you ever get to application. Um, and come to your own conclusions. Don's written a lot of books. Don, what's your website?
DonKPreston.com
Okay.
or BibleProphecy.com.
Okay. Also, you can go to Amazon, put in Don K. Preston. All of his books will come up. I recommend Don's books. My website is gracereach.org. I've written several books on eschatology, one on Daniel 2 called Nebuchadnezzar's Dream, The Statue, the Stone, and the Kingdom of Grace. I've written one on Daniel 9 called 490 Years Determined, the 70 weeks of Daniel explained. And I have written two books on Revelation right now. One's called Revelation Volume 1, Judgment on First Century Israel.
Hmm.
Revelation Volume 2 is called War on the Saints. I'm currently writing Revelation Volume 3 called The New Heaven and the New Earth, and much of what Don and I talked about tonight. If anybody wants to join a Bible study that I do on Zoom, I'm actually this Wednesday night, I'm teaching on 2 Peter chapter 3 for the next few weeks, tying it into Revelation 21, tying it back into Isaiah 65 and 66 so that we can truly understand 2 Peter 3. Don, thank you so much, my friend,
Thank
and
you.
I hope you have a good evening and get you some rest.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely.